Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and today I'm in St. Nicolas Lane. St. Nicolas Lane in Old Shoreham, because before the rain suddenly descends on me, my plan is to go and visit, if you can just see through the trees here, St. Nicholas Church, the old church at Shoreham. Shoreham by sea. It's a strange port, really, because just that way is the River Ada, and many years ago in the Saxon period there was a port here, and a thriving port, and you'll see by the size of the church that it must have been a significant place. But unfortunately the River Ada silted up and the port was moved further south, down actually on the Shingle Beach, or just close to the Shingle Beach, down on the English Channel there, down the seafront, which is now Shoreham by sea. And a second church was built because everything sort of moved south, only by a mile. However, this church was originally built here by the Saxons. Now there's debate about exactly when. There's thought that there was a church in the 5th century, certainly by the 9th century, as I come through this lovely lich gate and we start to see the church, the flint and rubble church. And I'm going to sort of circumnavigate first of all. We know that by the 9th century that there was a church here, probably a humble church, but curiously made of stone. Most of the times the Saxons built their churches of wood. It was much quicker and more convenient, and they weren't really terribly good stonemasons. However, on very important sites they did build in stone, and this is an example of one such. Of course, the Normans came, as we know, and invaded and started to change things and make things bigger. So the original church had a west tower and a nave, the tower being at the west, but it was moved, as you'll see on this one as it stands today, which is cruciform, which means it's in the shape of a cross. You've got the nave, the chancel, and then north and south transepts, with the tower right in the centre. I'm going to walk around the graveyard here just briefly, because it's a beautiful church surrounded by some modern buildings now, as you can probably see in the distance, but also a few older buildings. But this would have been a slight rise here. You don't really notice it when you're walking around, but there is a slight rise with great views, and you can almost see them when you come down this way across to the east, and in the far distance there is Lancing College, and naturally wasn't here when this was a port. It's curious though, because the Normans made great additions and adaptations to the church, like I've just described, with changing the moving the tower and improving the size and everything. But when the river silted up, they also built the church down on the new town as was. So it still held a lot of importance, even though the port was no longer used. As you can see here, a lot of rubble and a lot of flint. Now, of course, like most churches, there's been loads of adaptations. So built in the 9th century, cruciform, modified in the 12th century, modified again in the 14th century, and then modified yet again in the 19th century by the Victorians. By the time of the Victorian period, it was pretty ruinous, and if it wasn't for the Victorian restoration, this probably would have fallen into terrible disrepair. Let's go in. You can see here this wonderful doorway with a little bit of Norman zigzagging, and then an entrance. There's a lovely sign here that tells us the church is open and we're welcome inside. There's two doors to navigate. Shall close this one, keep the heat in, come through, and here we get our first glimpse, and we've come in on the west, really, into the south transept, which is kind of like a lobby, really. There's the font just down here. I don't actually know how old that font is. It doesn't look terribly old, but I've noticed there are information guides in here. So this was added to the Saxon church by the Normans. They also built the opposite north transept and the central tower in 1140. The round arches with their decorations are typically Norman work. Let's have a look at them. So just walking in here into the tower now, and this is very much a Norman thing, with all the decoration on the cross arches, which is beautiful, I have to say, and has stood the test of time really well. Beautiful masonry work. Now, there's some curiosities in this church. Let's have a look at some of those. Firstly, there are carved faces at the bottom of the arches, of the zigzags, and it's alleged that these are the faces. They're all quite sad and sombre, but they're supposed to be, or it's, as I say, it's alleged that it could be King Stephen and his wife Matilda, but there is some contention about that. There's actually, I don't know if you can see this, just at the top there is a mouse. And then there are also other grotesque faces just carved in, as you often find in churches. Let's go in to first the nave. So I'm coming through from the tower, which only I note has one bell, or at least one rope. My bell ringing friends would be able to tell me if there is any more bells up there. Coming into the nave, this still has the infrastructure of the original Saxon church, and we can see, although it's all, you know, nicely tarted up, the windows displayed like they were back in the day, extra thick, which is what the Saxons used to build in, because they weren't terribly confident builders. It was only as the Normans came in, who were much better stonemasons, could build thinner walls, and they knew how to buttress them and make them stand. But we look back and it's a terrific view behind me. We'll continue back past these more modern pews, and we note just here a north door that has now been filled in, and on the other side you'll see in the stonework the opposite of that. We'll carry on into crossing again this wonderful tower, which we didn't look up, did we? Let's look up. Some windows just at the top there. Beautifully restored, I have to say, and looked after and well loved. And I gather that the community here do look after their church very much, and welcome, as we saw just by that notice, that people are indeed welcome. Coming in here, more arches, and then we come up to the altar. This is now the chancel, and in front we see this rather magnificent east window, and I read that this east window was exhibited at the Great Exhibition of 1851. Quite how they did that, I do not know. How they managed to take the window out and get it up there, but that's what I read anyway. Looking back from the altar through the chancel, we come back onto the tiled floor, and we can see that in the north transept there is another altar, a chapel I suppose, with additional Normanesque carvings. The other thing I should say is, when the Victorians began to restore this place, they restored it with many Normanesque features, And Simon Jenkins, who has written a book on England's great churches, and he lists many of them, he says that there are more Normanesque features now than there ever were when the Normans did it. What I didn't mention, and I should have done, is that the roof in the chancel is very exquisite. It's a tie beam roof, and I think that's from when it dated. Above it on the outside is Horsham stone. Well, I have to say, that is a very welcoming church, and it's very lovely. Here's another final curiosity. On the buttress here, I don't know if you can see up here, there's this buttress in the middle of the south transept here, with this very fake zigzag lines around what looks like a lancet window. And I gather that's a Victorian additive, which is actually a little annoying really, because it doesn't look terribly genuine whatsoever. Anyway, the graveyard has a mixture of different trees. We've got a holm oak by the looks of things in front of me. We've got a horse chestnut there. There are some fir trees over there. I've been looking for a May yew tree, but I can't find one. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Become a patron, support what I do. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and why not visit the church as well if you're ever in the area. Till next time, I've been Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer. Bye for now. Bye bye.